Through the prayers of the Holy Father, through Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. For those new here, my name is Father Joseph Swaden. I've worked in Orthodox apologetics since 1998. I'm the founder of NFTU, True Orthodox and Ecumenical News, since 2004. We've been in the apologetic space on Facebook since 2018, on YouTube since 2018. And if you appreciate what we do here, like and subscribe. Today we're doing a kind of a review slash interview. We're talking to Father Patrick Ramsey. Hold on one moment. We're interviewing, discussing Father Patrick Ramsey's video on True Orthodoxy. And we are also waiting for him to arrive. So let's just get started. Father Antonius, good afternoon. That's just me. Father bless. Yeah, bless you. Nice opening. Yep, bless Father. May God bless you and we Father and Holy Spirit. Okay, so let's take a look here. So the video that we're kind of reviewing but we're going to be kind of discussing the points with Father Patrick today. Let's just see here. So he did a talk on True Orthodoxy. His channel is a St. George's Hermitage. And so I skipped to a part here where we hear a lot of what he was saying were very common questions, objections to True Orthodoxy. And this one's extremely common. So I'll start here.
There has been an attempt to reconcile themselves into more of a unified group, but they did split up. And this is one of the problems when you separate for the sake of a faith from the hierarchical structures of the church. When it comes just to faith, you have the same problem as the Protestants, is that you keep forever.
I feel bad. Last comments, more review. Last comments, more review. Okay. Yeah. Good evening from Great Britain. Father bless. God bless you. I don't know. I feel kind of like it's a little unfair to play this. We're waiting on Father Patrick. He's not here yet. So God willing, he'll be here in the next few minutes or so. But yeah, just to go through some of these are common objections. I don't fault him. I don't think he's doing it out of any insincerity. I think these are legitimately what people think. How many times have we heard True Orthodox were splitting? They split like the Protestants. It doesn't make sense. They don't know anything about us, but people say things like that, and it sounds good. So, in any case, I'm here to answer questions, etc., in the comments while we're doing this. So while we're waiting, if people want to ask questions or have any chats to put in the comments, just let me know. And let's see here. So outside of that, I am not seeing too much here. Okay. Denise says, blessings. I watched this last night. James says, so you have elected to stream early. Actually, no, it wasn't totally my choice. If you go to this video, you'll notice I said, we need to talk. I told him we should talk, and we did talk at about this time. And he told me this is an ideal time to stream. It's not my ideal time, but it is a time. Okay. Orthodox Field says, in his defense, he's partially right. I've lost count how many splits have happened in the Rossi. When it comes to the Rocor groups, there's Yukon's 362. I don't bother thinking about it. I just assume that if they're Rocor, they're descended from Rocor, they're Rocor, they haven't changed their position. And then I just stop listening to their, whatever goofy excuse they have to declare that they're the only church on earth, because they're not. Please keep Father Boniface and his health in everyone's prayers. Of course, Father Boniface, we all say prayers for him. You know him from our channel and from his own channel. And he is, God willing, he's scheduled to have some rectification on his medical issues soon. But he is in a lot of pain. So, pray for his relief as well as healing. I know it's cool. I actually was gonna pop on your stream a couple of days ago, Jim, and I fell asleep. Not because I just started falling asleep. Like I have this weird narcolepsy thing going on now all of a sudden where it gets to like 7 or 8 o'clock and 9, and I'm just like I'm knocked out. Then I wake back up and then I get knocked out again. Father, I heard you were looking for someone who knows Romanian, and noticed you watched a sermon from Archimandrite's Spirit on the live stream on the second channel. Well, I was hoping that somebody like among the priests, etc., spoke English, because I would like to hear about the situation in the Romanian church, and not from. I mean, no offense to you, obviously from your name, I can see you probably speak Romanian, but like to get an idea of what's happening from Romania. From Romania in terms of the true Orthodox, because they have so much. It looks like they have so much going on. I would just love to pick their brains. Which Romanian church, Latioara? Well, that's the largest of the true Orthodox in Romania. So that would be awesome. I mean, it's I don't want to hear anything from the new calendarists. They just make excuses for everything. Let me see here, and we're here at it's 14 minutes. Let me see here. From what I understand, they're soon to go into communion with the GOCM. Well, that's a choice. If they do that, they do that. I have no words on that. In any case, I have no opinion on the palace intrigues. So let me see here. I'm getting messages from everywhere. Let me see. So we are. I try not to think too much about that, and it's about 15 minutes in. I'm wondering if I got a message about this. Let me just check. No. No, I didn't get a message. Hoping everything's okay, Father Patrick. But in any case, let's see. I don't just want to do a live review. It's 41 minutes. On NFTU 2, there's a live review of the Father Peter Hears video that was taken down and that he put back up. Frankly, if you ask me, only the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes are worth it. Everything else is not worth it. I might put up a massively shortened version just for the main channel. But let me see here. Okay. Let's see here. What? Anonymous man asks, where can I find a church calendar so I can keep up with the fast feasts, etc.? Not just a Julian calendar, but the calendar with all the stuff in it. Most church calendars have the fast feasts, etc. We use St. John of Crunch.press primarily because of the fact that it's it's not only a nice looking calendar, but there's a pretty quick volume discount if you buy over 10. Um, it's now it doesn't have a backing. That is one of the differences. The other major one is Saint Innocent Press. Saint Innocent's calendar does have a backing. St. John of Kronstadt is just like single page months and assumes you have a backing for it. So, in any case, yeah. So that's not the case with the SJKP calendar. You okay? If you're looking, now that's a different story. If you're looking for just a church calendar online, there's Holy Trinity Orthodox, calendar, which is online. There's I know that Bishop Lazar of Niagara also has a calendar on his website. I believe that's triumphantcrossmonastery.com. Those are free. What I was telling, the ones I mentioned they cost money. So Saint Innocents would have some saints we don't recognize. No, that's a good point. That's very possible. So I'll have to double check it. I didn't double check it last year, so if I'm being honest. John MC says, I doze off often. I'm over a certain age and I watch many long lectures, streams, and premieres on YouTube day in, day out. This is soon coming to an end when Great Lent begins. Yeah. Well, let me see here. So we are in the 18th minute of the first hour. Still waiting. I'm sure whatever reason he has is most likely busy or things happen. So I mean, that's this is kind of where I am with it. Well, let me see here. Check my messages. Okay. So let me see here. If you want to make a comment, etc., this is a great time. So in any case, obviously I can't do like a live Q&A because I have the time scheduled. So hopefully Father Patrick pops on soon. And we'll see. Father bless. Ironically, how many World Orthodox clergy are making videos on us all of a sudden? Yeah. There's a lot of people doing it. That's the it's a new thing. And I think that a lot of them are legitimately concerned. But a lot of them are also legitimately like, we gotta cover it up. But I'm gonna take Father Patrick's video off the screen until he shows up, which I hope is soon. But yeah, it is there's all sorts of crazy stuff being said now. And we're, this is kind of where we have to, you have to just kind of circle the wagons a little bit. This is where there's going to, divisions and difficulties in true orthodoxy. This is where people are going to try to exploit them. It's shameful, really. But in any case, we could talk about that. That's actually kind of an irritating thing. When you will see, and this is not as common as it used to be, but it would be that two different sets of true Orthodox parties would appeal to a World Orthodox to World Orthodox almost as an intermediary, as though they were both competing for the hand of the same girl, the same diseased, syphilitic, ruined, mangled girl of World Orthodoxy. And that's embarrassing. Like that's truly embarrassing, I think. It made sense at the time of St. Chrysostom because the new calendars were lying to us, but why do that now? Now it just looks gross and pathetic. Ecumenism is getting, New Catacomb says, ecumenism is getting worse and we're growing more in their conscience. We cannot be ignored as crazy fanatics any longer. The truth always shines through. Unfortunately, we have much division. Yeah. As someone who is right in the middle, as I am in Rokor MP, I can see why people are fleeing World Orthodoxy and becoming true Orthodox, especially with the new things happening in the patriarchates. Now, that's an interesting thing because you mentioned that the TOC of Romania are joining the GOCM. Like, why are you in the middle of that mustard when you're literally in the Moscow Patriarchate, bro? Like, you're in the problem. Like, there's Rokor true Orthodox groups that are even in Romania. Like, why are you in the MP? Like, and why are you in our mustard? You know, straighten. What's the term? Physician, heal thyself. um, it's tricky. It's tricky, man. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that it's sad if you want in. I know who I am. I know I am. I'm just trying to find a way out of World Orthodoxy. Well, if you know about Slatioara and you probably know about other Romanian Orthodox, any of them. It's that simple. Yeah, this is true. The MP website does all the work about reporting on ecumenism for us. If you're putting up a link, it's not going to work unless you send it to me privately because, if links won't work on a lot of YouTube sites, you kind of have to approve it. And I don't have an approval system here on StreamYard. Okay. So I was given that. Give me 1 second. We'll take a look at it. Oh, another one. Here we go. We're just waiting for Father Patrick still. I'm actually going to put that in my. Hold on. All right. So while we're waiting for Father Patrick, now we're going to make it more existential. It's like waiting for Godot. Anyway, so this says the DECR representative takes part in the Interfaith Forum in Moscow. So this is even in Moscow. So the DECR, for those who don't know, the Department for External Church Relations is basically their ecumenical group. So as we can see, we see the Muslim hats. Let's see. There's other pictures. On February 12th, an international academic and research conference on intercultural cooperation as a factor in preserving traditional and spiritual and moral values took place in Moscow. It was organized by the Centralized Religious Education Religious Organization International Islamic Mission in collaboration with the Foundation for the Support of Islamic Culture, Science, and Education and the Moscow State Linguistic University. Okay, so there's a Muslim guy. Oh, this is she's like one of the feds. She's like the Department of State or something. That's a fed right there. Okay, here's some fancy dress Muslims with some interesting robes. An Indian guy. Okay, maybe like a A Chechen guy or something. Okay, this is, I guess, our Moscow Patriarchate representative, the Buddha, a Jewish guy, some other guy. All right, so you have this is okay. So this is all those people that were listed. There they are, with the blessing of Metropolitan Anthony of Volokomsk. Huh? Really? What's the date on this? I thought the Metropolitan Anthony of Volokomsk is like, wasn't he out? I guess he's still there. This is weird. Okay, so let's go. Let's see what's going on here. All right, so yeah, that was weird on a few levels. Okay, so let's take a look at the comments, and let's see. Yep, we did this. We're in the same boat. I'm old yet making many changes. Uh-oh. Chechen Muslim hats. As someone who lives in Britain, I don't really have many options for true Orthodox in my area. I don't drive, and I would rather not go to the Matthewites. I'm not sure. Okay, that was Hilarion Alfiev. Okay, who got ousted. Anthony replaced him. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how England works, but from what I understand, um, you have trains that can take you from one side of the country to the other because it's not that big of a country. There are people here who will travel the triple of the distance in terms of states to get to a true Orthodox church. You may not want to do that, but that's on your soul. Let me see here. Still waiting. Okay. Thank you. Uh-huh. Oh boy, oh boy. So we're still waiting. I'm gonna write. Let me just write him a message. Hopefully he sees it. Let me see. Let me see if I can message him in Gmail. I don't think he forgot. Well, I'm gonna review. Hold on. All right. So what's gonna happen is this: if I can't get in touch with him, then what I will try to do is I'm just gonna review the video, and we'll go through it quick and make some skips. All right. All right. Let me see if that works. Hopefully it does. Let's get to the stream. Yeah. Any more news? It's a lot worse in Canada, the U.S. Any more news on that trouble interfaith temple in Russia? From what I understand, it's already built. So I don't think that there will be any Matthewites is a very cool name, though. I'm sure you'd like it, Matthew. But they are true Orthodox. So if you find one near you, you can always join them. It's for Saint Matthew of Brisbane, who was the leader of their group. I'd like to see. I know that you like having long arguments, and I'd like to see if we can do a one-on-one sometime online. And that would be interesting. Yeah, the UK is the size of Montana. Uh-huh. I didn't know that. Apparently North Korea is the size of Mississippi. Yep. I could get a ferry to the Isle of Man and get to the Matthewite Church, and they don't. But I heard they don't recognize the sanctity of Saint John Maximovich, and I don't know what to make out of it. Yeah, I've been concerned. I heard that some Russian Matthewites don't recognize Saint Tikhon, so I'm that is concerning to me. If they really believe that, I'm not sure. Like the entire true Orthodoxy recognizes the sanctity of Saint Tikhon. So that would lead me to question that. Also, Father Joseph, what Father Methodius' last name I can't spell. You could at least try. He said something pertaining to weightlifting that convicted me during a stream not too long ago. Okay, well, I hope that helps. Peter Stoika and Father Bless. God bless you, Peter and Molly. Let me see here. Okay. All right. So if we don't see Father Patrick in the next 5 minutes or so, I'll just kind of review the video a little bit. Yep. A lot of Matthew would say this is news to me. Like that's a dangerous territory. I would say where angels fear to tread. Yeah, the Fond du Lac photo, we've all seen it. It doesn't prove much. It's just ridiculous. I just put together a compilation of Novus Ordo clown masses. Should be entertaining. Yep. Chuastek, yes, that is his name. Let me see here. All right, so let's put the video on. Give me just a moment. And we'll address points point by point. Okay, Peter Stoika does ask, hold on, before we do that. May I ask you, what is your opinion on the Church of Czech lands and Slovakia? Well, from what I understand, we have an archbishop in our own synod of the Czech lands. So Bishop Gavrilo of, I think it's Moravia, I want to say, but and I'm sure he's not the only one. So there are true Orthodox in your area. I do not fundamentally and hierarchically recognize the organization known as World Orthodoxy as true, so I don't recognize pieces of it as true, and I don't totally even understand how they work together. I recognize true Orthodox or synods in Greece, in Russia, Romania, in the Czech lands, etc., as true. So I'm always going to refer back to our people who are worldwide, and they are all over the place, including in the Czech lands and Slovakia. And I would advise you to go to them. If you're talking about them, then I approve of them. I also have the options of an Artok Church or Brookwood Brotherhood, but the train tickets are just exorbitant. Okay, well, I think that's a fair criticism in terms of cost. But why not call them and see if maybe there's a parishioner near you that might be able to split gas with you on that. I mean, that's always an option, carpooling. But first you have to find someone to carpool with. All right. So I'll get to comments again soon. Let's get to this. We'll watch it live and see what he says here. So put here.
Ever splitting up one group that take themselves into more of a unified group, but they did split up. And this is one of the problems when you separate in this for the sake of the faith from the hierarchical structures of the church. When it comes just to faith, you have the same problem as the Protestants, is that you keep forever splitting up from one group to another. So the Protestants have multiple groups, each claiming to be more consistent with the Bible than the next. and each claiming the other is not quite right. Now, the Orthodox, probably more than most Protestants, actually in the end sort of say, well, all of us have this problem, so we sort of semi-accept everybody as being there as long as they're not Roman Catholic. And Orthodox, sort of depends on which one they are, what flavour they are. But the old Canon is sort of a little bit even more strict and on this. But the trouble is, as soon as you start breaking away the hierarchical institutions, remaining in communion with the hierarchical institutions, it's very hard to stop splitting into more and more different groups on the matter of truth, because you just simply.
All right, welcome, Father Patrick. He has arrived.
My apologies. I thought it was tomorrow night.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Okay, was it?
That's
now,
right.
Now I feel bad.
A friend of mine posted that you were waiting for me, and my emails have problems as well. When you reply,
I'm sorry. Well, no worries. No worries.
So
I
anyway,
was just
I'm
confused.
happy to keep going.
Yeah. So, well, we were just discussing the concept of splitting. Right now, one thing I didn't want to do a full video review. I kind of wanted to springboard ideas so we could discuss them, as opposed to just reviewing the video. But I just put it on because you weren't here.
My apologies again.
No worries. No worries.
And my silly emails not working properly.
No worries. Okay, so it was an interesting video. I thought many of the objections against true orthodoxy they're very common ones. And so I wanted to kind of, elaborate on them further. Like in this one, it was the question of when does the splitting end? Like, is it, ad infinitum, like in Protestantism, or not? And I think that there's I'd like to think that there's a standard as Orthodox Christians that, where we can't go. And so that's my kind of positing. I see kind of the deposit of faith as a limiter to keep that from happening. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on
it. Yeah. Yes. So the idea of the splitting up, etc. Yeah, I thought. Well, from what I've seen with the old calendar movement, much to my sadness, in many ways, it is that it has tended to fragment. But I'm sort of more pleased to see some sort of attempts to sort of reunify it again. I think everyone's seen that this is a problem, and I think because, as I think I stated in the video, the church has two principles, as you see in the famous canons of the 861 Council, 13, 14, and 15, where the priest must recognize his bishop, the bishop is metropolitan, and the metropolitan, the patriarch. And this hierarchical structure up to patriarch is very important to keep the unity. And you see this most complete with Rome's self-understanding of its position, right from early times. And I would have to agree with them that this patriarchal position is quite important for the unity, because if we just simply go on matters of truth, we all mess up. We all never get it quite right. And what heresy is too much to split apart, or whereas if you've got a hierarchical structure, you've got to stay united to these patriarchates, unless the very difficult, very rare situations where you step away. It helps to overcome a lot of the problems of people fighting and bickering, as you see in the first centuries of the church.
Well, one point I'd like to make is that in times of heresy and schism, even you'd find rival patriarchates. So, and I don't mean rivals as in one established patriarchate versus another. I mean, within the patriarchates, you'd find rival claimants for sees. And yes. So I think once we're looking at it from that ecclesiastical perspective, it doesn't seem particularly shocking to me that, unfortunately, these things happen. But they're a feature of church history.
Yes. Well, we certainly have the two arms as a hierarchical structure, with a certain stability in the Petrine See as such. When I say Petrine, I'm talking about the broader sense of Gregory the Great, of Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, then Constantinople, and Jerusalem. You can throw the Pentarchy, as it later becomes known, and that has a sense of stability there as well. Now, it doesn't mean, you're right, none of these things in itself is a guarantee. So I disagree with a Roman position that the Pope is infallible. The See of Rome would, in itself would never fall. No, and neither Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople. So I'm not in the position where they would never fall. But you'd have to push me quite hard to say that they have fallen. But anyway, so we've got that with obviously the Orthodox faith and the maintaining of a faith, and these are two elements. And I think even with the Old Calendar movement, there is a sense of having the Archbishop of Athens, or some of these the ones who are more centralized points of unity for the various Old Calendar churches. Otherwise, you just end up fragmenting away. And this is why the early church, you do get every bishop as part of a synod of metropolitan, etc. And then the metropolitan synods are referenced to exarchs, patriarchs, etc. As a bond of unity, and why Rome says all churches converge to one, to unify them in this sense. And I think this is very important. And so if you just have simply truth in itself without a sort of an obligatory sort of structure to hold on to, even if the structure itself has its problems, we have contending bishops for it. I think it just gets too easy to fragment it, too hard to stop it. That's my sense. Now, there might be proofs otherwise, but I'm just putting that case forward.
Okay, well, now my question becomes this: if we know, for example, that we have bishops that are confessing the truth and saying the dozens, saying organized hierarchy, etc., what's the motivation for somebody on my end to want to come into communion with people who are innovators? Like I don't understand the logic. I did try it once when I was young, and it made no sense, and I went back like a year later. So I'm still trying to get that. Like, it seems like there's no like, I've seen compromise when it comes to dealing with Roman Catholics, and I've seen compromise when it comes to dealing with Protestants. I have not seen any compromise when it comes to dealing with us. Every dealing with us seems to have ended with more new calendarism, more ecumenism, and if you didn't like it, get out.
Well, now, on the particular point of the relations between the ecumenical patriarchate, for want of another option, and the Old Calendar movement, yes, I'm sitting there looking, going, the Old Calendarists are basically trying to, maybe a little bit, just for the sake of the wordage, fanatical or maybe a little obsessed by a particular point of doctrine or thing like that. But generally, they're orthodox, and they're trying to live a pious and orthodox life, and they're at least trying to follow our traditions in the same way. They're not actually spouting off some radical heresy at this stage, and so we should take them more accepting than say Roman Catholics and stuff, with much vaster differences in doctrine and in practice, and of the monophysites, all this. They're far further away from us. But no, it is not. But it just seems to me that this is more about. Is it just about power, that you're claiming to be us and you're not doing what we want? So we're going to fire you away. But these other ones, they've been away for a long time. We'll be all nice to them. Or
we want to cozy up to papacy because it's big and powerful, and we want there's the support, as has happened historically many times, just trying to get the Western military on their side.
I think that's a legitimate point. I think the question of secular power, to some degree, is undergirding a lot of these issues. One, just look at the situation in Ukraine. You can clearly see the hands of both on either side of either the CIA or the FSB. The Patriarch of Constantinople, despite his personal feelings, which I'm sure are heretical, but they're also paid for. And so the problem, we have these issues here where the question is, there's also, besides the secular power, but there's also the spiritual power. And in that sense, I think that, like, say, for example, a Metropolitan Demetrius in America is equally, if not far more dangerous to the status quo than, say, a Metropolitan Alphidophorus. Because it's not snuggy, fat, fake orthodoxy. It's the real thing, and that's dangerous to the status quo. I mean, we saw that with Elder Ephraim. This would be 10 times worse if suddenly the true Orthodox managed to really reach out to the Greek population to the level of where the Greek Archdiocese is at, and our state agencies wouldn't be fans. They've invested countless amounts of money into the Greek Archdiocese in America for decades. That stuff is all declassified. So the point is, it would ruin a lot of plans, secular plans, I should say, for people to become true Orthodox en masse, because they'd be largely uncontrolled by the state. The state would have to go back to referring things to patriotism. And this is someplace where I believe the Russian state is ahead of, say, America and other regions. So they have that advantage. That doesn't mean that advantage still can't be used by other countries. It just means that they haven't bothered to consider it yet, which is why the Ukraine war on the Western side looks like we're invading with rainbow flags.
Indeed. Yes, so we've got, obviously, if the true Orthodox expand it out big enough, eventually it'll be attacked by the world, and all these problems will start, bishops will be brought out, and all the rest of these things will sort of hit across. So, I mean, it just will go from age to step to step. But yes, there's a lot powerful worldly interest in there. So yeah, no, I can't obviously in public confirm or deny any particular thing, but I see those suspicions. Now, another point you raised, Dad, why would you want to come to the innovators of the? I think we could possibly swing it around that say up to the 20th century, we do have a sort of continuation of our recognition of Orthodox churches around the Pentarchy, or the Forarchy, is Quattrarchy, whatever you call it, of the Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem, and then you've got the Russia and on the side there. So up to the 20th century, we do associate Orthodox faith with this continuing hierarchy. So I think we'll all agree to that. In 1923, Patriarch Meletius, is it?
Meletius.
The problem, of course. So after that, we're good. So the question is not so much whether you should join them, the patriarch, is whether it's justified to leave that structure. Is it justified to leave the Petrine sees of Alexandria and Antioch and the Rome as in Constantinople? Is it justified to leave that? If that's really the question. There is the innovation, is the corruption so strong that it necessitates to set aside? And then you've got the problem that once you do that, and this is the other problem, from where are you deriving a continuing episcopal hierarchy?
Mhm.
So otherwise you come from the patriarchs, they are all ordained for one. You get bad ones, you get contenders, but they get pushed out. But that continuing system of self-recognized, mutually all recognized, carries on. So the little irregularities get ironed out and carries on. Or the irregularities end up in a complete schism, and one set is accepted by the others, and the other ones are considered to have been cut off, as you get in Alexandria, in about the 3 or 4 patriarchs of Antioch floating around.
Well, this is Memento Mori asked a question, which is one that I was thinking actually myself. So, there was no Pentarchy in the early church, right? Why would that be a requirement? Unless I misunderstood Father Patrick. And I want to expand on that because you mentioned the triumvirate of Rome through Constantinople, Alexandria, and Antioch. What I'm saying is, I don't see any evidence, at least in my readings, in the earliest parts of church history when it was a triad, and then in the later parts where it was a pentarchy. Every single see fell, once or twice in history, sometimes more than that. And the church's movement was more fluid. So the apostolic succession, apostolic succession is not simply connection to a formal structure, it's connection to each local church and the apostles who founded them. So there's a fluidity going on, like from our end. We derive from, for the most part, we used to derive from the True Orthodox Church of Greece and Russia, and now we derive from Bulgaria, from Romania. It's Orthodox Traditionalist Publications says, what do the contemporary elders say? Now this has been a kind of a side discussion that's been happening. It looks here like Father Averki. He says he's under the Romanian Church under Metropolitan of Loggia, who would be the head of the main True Orthodox Church of Romania. I was curious as to why he recommended the ROCOR MP as opposed, in terms of, and I think that this is a common question. Father Averki says, Father Joseph, I would recommend the church abroad. Which church abroad? On many different levels: education of clergy, piety, humbleness, knowledge. Okay, that just says you like them better. But the reality is that being part of the True Church of Romania, there was a split with the True Orthodox of Greece under Archbishop Kalinikos and the True Orthodox of Bulgaria over COVID. So I'm curious as to how COVID suddenly became more important than joining the surginess. Like, if I can understand how that works, maybe I can get a better idea of where you're at. Okay, so Father Patrick, so that's my question to you is, where does is this formal structure historically even really necessary as long as there are churches that are confessing and remaining alive?
Well, good question. Now, as far as I can see from the evidence, the Patron sees were very apostolic. You've got Peter in Antioch, you've got Peter in Rome, you've got Peter in Alexandria via Mark. By the First Ecumenical Council, you're getting that from ancient custom, which can only mean apostolic, because the fathers were very much against innovation. So when they say ancient custom, they're meaning apostolic. That Rome was given a priority, Alexandria was given the next, and Antioch was next, based on the chief cities of the empire. You see Gregory the Great talk about there's one Petrine see in the three, and this is important to unify the sees in a hierarchical structure, because when we talk about what we have the churches, we go to St. Ignatius of Antioch, we have the churches is where the bishop is. And so whereas the bishop of the church is the ones in the communion of the other bishops, the one who's ordained by the metropolitan with the consent of the synod there. And then those ones are in the church structure connected through to the patriarchs. So that sort of sets us, because the church is physically present based on the hierarchy of the bishops and their intercommunion. This is why you have the diptychs and you cut them off from the diptychs, etc. So that's why we need this structure, so that we can actually define what are the churches and which are not the churches. So, and by default, this structure is, and that's why it's a patron, it's got a rock to it, because it has to provide a certain stability. Otherwise, we very quickly start losing the sense of who is a church and who's not. And even if each one goes up and down, in and out of communion, after a couple of bishops or 2 or 3 bishops, they settle back down and being brought back into Orthodox faith, unless and Dioscorus goes off and takes 3/4 of it. Well, then they recognize a new one for their ecumenical council. Right, we've got a new patriarch there. And so this has actually been really quite important to keep a sense of the unity of the Catholic Church. I use the word Catholic, by the way, here.
Right, it's universal, right. No, we understand.
We are the Catholic Church, in a sense. So I'm not meaning Roman Catholics, I'm just speaking of us. I had this conversation with another friend today, and actually was even talk about Orthodoxy as a sort of ecumenist plot in some ways to sort of cut out that we are the Orthodox Church. That so-called is we have a Catholic Church, one holy Catholic Apostolic Church. And so this is apostolic, and that is very important for the stability of the churches. And as soon as you go off this, you break it away. Now, it's just interesting that if you go to the monophysite communion, the churches in India still recognize their patriarch until recently, and there has had some schism, as that of Antioch. The patriarch of Antioch is, and that shows that the importance of Antioch in the sense of unifying that when Georgia becomes a church, it sends to the patriarch of Antioch to send missionaries and priests at the time of Nina to catechize and bring the people in. That was Antioch. I don't know why ecumenical patriarch is something about the autocephaly of Georgia when it was Antioch that gave it in the first place. Russia had abused it, and ecumenical patriarch sort of, so we gave. I was like, well, no. And I look at it, this thing and said, Georgia, 1914 or something. What's this? Anyway, that's aside. So these things are important. So my issue is that we should stick to this, as I said, the canons are, unless they've preach a heresy which is condemned already, that i.e. by an ecumenical council, effectively one of the ancient heresies, Arianism or something like that, not one which we haven't actually judged yet to be a heresy. And I think that's quite important. So the standard of separating from there, and that's one thing of just not recognizing your bishop or the patriarch. That's the second thing, to actually start setting up a parallel jurisdiction in response to that problem. So you'll get one of the priests here who's just gone off as a non-commemorator, and he won't move into a old calendar grouping because he still recognizes himself as, doesn't recognize the bishop, but he's still a priest of that jurisdiction.
Yeah, I know. This is it's the case of Father Mateo Konetscu.
Yes. And there's a few of them on the Holy Mountain, etc. So I do think we've got to be very careful about speaking about the church apart from this core part of the patriarchates. And for example, just the old calendars. If we talk about the tradition of the church, Athens is an innovation. It's not an archbishopal see. It should be a Thessaloniki as the chief see of that area.
Well,
and so
this
sort of thing about making Athens too strong is sort of feeding into an innovation due to the
but Thessaloniki has always been considered. That was always considered a Roman suffragan see. I mean, Athens was, its first hierarch was Saint Dionysius the Areopagite, was a disciple of Saint Paul.
No, Athens is definitely a see of certain points, but in the see of priorities in Greece, Thessaloniki has always been the more important see. It's been exarchate under Rome, then it was important under the ecumenical patriarchy.
We got a super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel from Black Ortho Acolyte for $4.99. As Father Patrick, are there canons outlining different criteria for separating from a bishop versus separating from a patriarch, or are they the same?
Right. Well, the canons in question are 13, 14, 15 of the First Second Council in 8861, our famous canons.
Right,
now,
the first, second, third.
Yeah. So the Canon 13 basically every priest or presbyter, I should say more correctly, it should stay with his recognized as bishop, and if you move off, you're in some form of schism. Then the Canon 14, every bishop must remain with his metropolitan, and then the Canon 15, every metropolitan with his patriarch. And then the Canon 15 adds in an exception, except if the patriarch, including metropolitan bishop, starts to preach a heresy condemned by the ecumenical council or the synods of the fathers, that has been condemned. In other words, one where the judgment of the heresy has already been passed by an appropriate level of counsel vis-a-vis the person you're talking to. So it may be that your bishop, if your local synod has passed that, then you can use the synod's judgment against your bishop to step away from it. But when it comes to the patriarch, you're really having to talk about an ecumenical council, which they have affirmed.
Or the Orthodox tradition of the public, yes, or the fathers.
Oh yeah, it does say fathers, but to which the patriarch themselves refers that they are following their teaching. So you could talk about something like ecumenical fathers, Basil the Great, John Chrysostom, Gregory Theologian. They've set out the heresies, and some of it may be one of the canons of Basil the Great. You could hold the patriarch against that because he's promised in his ordination to obey those things, to teach consistently to those. But you'd have to show that he is that one of the teachings of those fathers to which he has promised to obey, and that he has said things which made the standard of the heresy, such as for Arianism, he says there was one time when Christ was not. There was, or whichever one of his heresies he teaches, there is one nature of Christ, and the area they merged together, or something like. He teaches some Epictetus or something. So he actually makes, and he has to do it not in a private conversation with you at a table, but publicly, and ideally preaching. Now I'm going to go for a little aside here, just for fun of it. And usually that preaches in the church, and bareheaded there, it just sort of means boldly in a sense there. We don't have to say that. But curiously, I've watched them practice. In the Rome, for example, it's very interesting. They never said the creed and never preached at Mass or the liturgy in Rome, which meant that they never actually taught heresy in the liturgy. So Rome was actually stable because it simply didn't preach, or it didn't claim it a creed. It's only when they started to say the creed publicly with the filioque, where the Eastern churches went, whoa, now you've done something against the Eighth Ecumenical Council or council there. You've added to the creed. You've brought condemnation. We can step away from you. But that's only then when it did it. And it's interesting. Most a custom I see on Orthodox, especially they always cover their head when put a hat on when they're preaching, rather than preaching bareheaded from the altar. I don't know if there's any connection to the canon. Therefore, they're not bareheaded. Therefore, you can't blame heresy. Just this little aside, but it's one of the curious things of modern Orthodox preaching practice. That the priests tend to put a hat on when you cover their head. Now so it's quite high standards, and so that's just to stop commemorating there. That's a whole different issue to having another parallel jurisdiction alongside that. So
again, as someone pointed out earlier, if you're holding to the original position, you're not the parallel jurisdiction. But the more important question is this: if bishops leave their patriarch over the bareheaded preaching of heresy, what do you expect them to do? I mean, eventually they have to do something. They can't just stand there and do nothing.
Yeah. No, that's right. Well, the interesting case is going back to priests. And the priest stops. Well, this is okay for what, 5-10 years, but the priest dies. That's the end of a parish. Or what if you need some new clergy for your parish? Who's going to ordain them? And suddenly you start to get all the priests can ordain them. Whoa, where are you going with this? So there is some danger here. Now, the bishop, obviously, you need a synod to appoint bishops. That's why the synods are apostolic, that we have these apostolic, you have the metropolitan councils.
Wait. Why wouldn't they just go to true bishops?
No, hold a minute. Right. So you have your I'm just setting up the structure. I'm not dealing with the particular point at the moment. So yes, you have the metropolitan. So a bishop can't replicate himself. A bishop doesn't ordain a successor. The bishop always dies in office or retires, and the synod appoints it. So the recognizes a new bishop. So then your problem is, okay, you've got a bishop, so you're right. He's on his own. He can't replicate himself. He can't continue. The diocese dies with him. So the only way to have a new bishop for the diocese is to get other bishops to ordain someone there.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you will start to go to, I suppose, if everybody is in heresy, so everyone's teaching Arianism, for example, you would have to go to the bishops who are standing against, not teaching Arianism to come in there. And so this I can see is a sense of economy. So I'm open to the sense and the argument. And I think there is a case that if somehow the patriarchs have actually fallen into the heresy to the standard of Canon 15, and then you need to continue the church parallel jurisdictions. Yeah, I can see that there would be an argument to be made for other bishops who are not doing it to come and ordain. Though we've got to be very careful in the canons who's got the jurisdiction to do what. We can't just sort of let it go totally free for all, because you've only got, metropolitans can only ordain bishops in his territory. So we're starting to step into economy here and economies, and then it's sort of it can be easily abused if that makes sense.
I get it. I get what you're saying, and what you're describing appears to be like a worst case theoretical scenario. But I mean, the canons govern how we're supposed to do things. So when you take, for example, let's take the True Orthodox Church of Greece, for example. The 3 bishops separated. Eventually, they had formed 7 bishops. At one point, there was a schism between the Florinites and Matthewites. When the Matthewites realized that there were going to be no other bishops left, they single-handedly ordained a synod of 12 bishops, because a synod of 12 bishops, from the canon's perspectives, is the only one that can functionally operate it. And when the Florinites got new bishops from the Russian church abroad, 3 years later, they ordained first 3, then 7, then ultimately 12, because you have to have that level of quorum. Without 12 bishops, you can't depose a bishop. So the point is...
Yes. If you're going to follow it's interesting that I hadn't realized that. But yes, of course, you need 12 bishops to judge another bishop. Of course, yeah. And of course, you can always do economy on some of these things. But I think you really want to minimize any of this economy, because I think you'll realize if you don't, you're going to end up having things come biting you backwards later.
Right, but and I understand minimizing economy. I'm all for it. But when minimizing economy involves, say, for example, arresting and killing thousands of people, I'm against it. Because there's no reason to do that. That's not, at that point, that's not economy. That's just outwardly crazed and violent behavior. And I'm referring in this case to the new calendarists and what they did to the old calendarists for something like 50 years. They were the old calendarists were literally under violent threat. They have a number of martyrs, many of whom are famous in Greece. And I could point to a number of different cases, but the whole point is it's hard for me to argue that let me put it to you this way. I would be very cross with somebody who, even in the most extreme situation, like what happened with Bishop Matthew ordaining single-handedly, I cannot humanly see how that is worse in the eyes of God than, say, Archbishop Spiridon Vlachos of the New Calendarists arresting a priest and dumping the mysteries in the toilet. I tend to think that at the very least, the behaviors you can see are radically different. And one of them sounds orthodox. And I'm not talking about New Calendarists now. I'm sure some of them are very nice people, but the ones that they came from weren't. And that is almost never being addressed.
Yeah, so historically there was times when these sort of things happen in opposition. So how orthodox, how bad, who does what, so Justinian, some of the emperors with some of the schismatics, how do they treat them, etc. I don't know, but I'm just putting it out there just to maybe not to get...
Well, yeah, but Emperor Justinian was the emperor. He had to deal with the civil concerns. But one thing I do want to point out is that I don't want to imply that this persecution has ended, because it hasn't. I mean, I've, in the Greek church, I know that there's still court cases going on over buildings that were never part of the New Calendar State Church. When I was in Russia, in between 2004 and 2006, I got to see the Tsar Constantine Cathedral of Roac. It was filled with people, hundreds of people singing. It was a beautiful and amazing service. And the Russian state took away the building on the request of the Moscow Patriarchate. And to me, that would be acceptable if they were putting a bunch of people in it and they needed the church for that. But now it's just an empty tourist site where they just charge admission.
Yeah. Well, this is the issue when you've got church and state quite closely aligned, which is not something you deal with in the US, but everywhere else in Europe, this has always been the case, that there is a very close connection between church and state. As you say, Emperor Justinian is emperor. So it's not surprising in some ways that there is this sort of level of state persecution, much more than an American would be aware of. Now, whether it's justified, whether it's correct and stuff, yes, that's a different argument. But I'm not surprised that the church, which is recognized by the state, can and often does use state power to try to squash the schismatics from their point of view. And look, in some part of me, even if I was in the schematic, I think it's a little bit of playing the game as well, because I do think in the history there are times when the church, with the state power, did sort of persecute and sort of Arians and stuff, and close down their churches and stuff like that. So if we're on the other foot, I'm not saying it's necessarily that we're the right guys, we're persecuted, but
Well,
I
you
can find historical evidence.
But we have to do that, because this is my point, and this is going to sound horrible, Father, but for example, you're pointing out that the state persecuted the Arians, so on and so forth. So this is something that was done in church history. From my perspective, and maybe this is me being a hyper ecclesialist, etc., or whatever they call them, I would say the Arians deserved it. I would say that they were enemies of the state. They often caused violence. They often caused problems within cities. They tried to take over regions physically. They were a threat to the state. I don't have a problem with saying that. My concern is when you compare Orthodox victims to Arians. then it starts feeling like you're justifying the Arians, in which case you
Oh
kind of
no, I'm not justifying the Arians, and you're probably right. There's more behind it. All I'm just stating is that the fact of some persecution in itself shouldn't be like, oh, they're wrong. Now there we go to another level, whether it's justified or whatever, whether the alternatives are causing any problems, etc., whether there's truth, etc. But I'm just pointing out that the fact that there is some form of state trouble in itself doesn't necessarily prove any particular point or side. We need to go into a lot of other
but that's my point, is that I bring it up because I'm trying, what we're talking about are historical origins, ultimately, because these are events often, with the exceptions of the one I mentioned, that occurred, decades ago. And I mean, I hate to say this, but I've brought this up many times over the past 2 or 3 years, and you would be surprised how often people use the let bygones be bygones argument when it's our people that are the ones that are getting killed. It's hard for me to let bygones be bygones.
It's sort of the personal level.
We killed you, but please let bygones be bygones.
Well, it's by a certain stage you've got to sort of do that, otherwise you never get any. We're in a hillbilly feud fight forever, which is not helpful either. And there's legitimate reason to be in that feud fight. But anyway, yes, I empathize. I'm not happy that there's this persecution and the stuff, the treatment of Ecumenical Monastery, for example, on the Holy Mountain, and their position. I definitely don't like the force and the police going in there. I much take the position of the sort of the outer St. Joseph of Hesychast monasteries. We just leave them in peace, even if we disagree with their particular standard, just leave them in peace, sort of thing. So I'm with you. Yes, we got these questions.
This was a comment, but I try to put everything up.
All right, yeah.
This is a question.
I think the questions do come down to the threshold of when you are to break off from your patriarch, your bishop, etc., whether that has been sufficiently crossed, and then it's a matter of obeying the canons thereafter as best you can to keep the church going. Now, in the church history, if you go to some of the missions, you'll do get a single bishop doing some ordinations, like in Ireland and things like that. So it's not completely unheard of. And from my perspective, actually, the important thing of the communal thing, it's not there's a magic number of 2 or 3 bishops for the mystery to happen necessarily. It's that a bishop is recognized by the other bishops of the church. Mm-hmm. And this is done through the metropolis, the unanimous consent of others, that he is actually a bishop. So it's not 2 or 3 is just a symbol that 2 or 3 agree in the name, but there's a mutual recognition by others of him as a minimum number. That's probably the whole synod. And of course. So even if the ordination is done by one, and sometimes in the UK, if the Pope, Bishop of Rome gave his permission tacitly to them, gave him
a synod can allow a single-handed consecration. Yeah, no one can.
And so even though he's the one ordained, it's still done with the mutual consent, especially of him. You're implying with others. So again, that one bishop does this, I think, is a lot less a problem than some of these other things you have mentioned. That I'm actually affirming your position on that. Then we've got. Yeah, so it's a matter where we meet the standards. Well, there's a couple of things. One, whether you meet the standards to go out. And 2, I think it's interesting whether you may be justified in going out. There's a second, whether you are justified in condemning the other sees in a sense of they've lost no grace, they're all gone. So there's a state of the resistance movement, which was one of the earlier old streams of old Canon movement. It was a synod and resistance sort of thing, where you're not denying the grace and you're carrying on. And I think that's another issue where there's an economy position from the old calendar side to, okay, we want to move away from this corruption, but we're not going to necessarily make any formal statements to condemn them just yet. We just don't want to be caught up with that.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the important things to remember is one of the earliest reviews of Metropolitan Cyprian's thesis, and I don't know if I forget who it was Bishop Gregory Grabbe or somebody else, said it seems like Metropolitan Cyprian wants to believe that everybody is in 1937. Because kind of his position was reflecting that of a wavering Metropolitan St. Chrysostomos of Florina in 1937 when he wasn't sure about himself, which of course he corrected himself 13 years later with the 1950 encyclical. But the point is that it is much later than 1937 now, and it's not like their position has changed. In some ways, it's gotten worse. Meanwhile, from my perspective, and this is because I remember 20 years ago how sordid and confusing, even 25 years ago with the Roe Corps before they split into pieces, I remember how sordid and confusing a lot of the things were, and they simply are a lot better now. As you mentioned, this is, it can't just be one or two bishops recommending each other. We're dealing with, at this point, multiple true Orthodox synods. The largest one having a communion of somewhere around 80 bishops all over the world. The second largest, having a communion of around 60. Just those two alone, and there are quite a number of other true Orthodox bishops. Because remember, in World Orthodoxy, the number of bishops all over the world is, I believe, 330. So, if among us there are 150 bishops, we're not doing all that bad, and we've restored a lot of the ancient sees that needed to be restored historically. Because this is one of the hard things is we don't have Constantinople, but it's important to remember what historically Constantinople had become before the calendar system. If we look after 1453 with the fall of Constantinople, Constantinople became the head of the Rum Millet. And so despite the idea that the ancient sees were united, they were effectively rubber stamps for whatever Constantinople said. Constantinople said something, and Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem were all literally just in Constantinople until circumstances changed and allowed them to return. And then about the Melkite schism, and then finally the Russians allowing Arab bishops to be made again in the Patriarchate of Antioch, and right at the turn of when ecumenism happened. So the point is that really the country making all those moves right after Constantinople was really Greece. And so ultimately, even now, I saw last week, the Greek Congress is suddenly paying for 200 more priests to be used in foreign churches like Alexandria and in Jerusalem, Constantinople, the historic Greek parishes that are still under the power of Greece. So the Greek state is effectively taking over the role. If that makes sense.
I mean, I was just scandalized going to Jerusalem, seeing the Greek flag flying there, and going, what's a Greek flag got to do with Jerusalem? The church is not a Greek national, a Greek national thing. The church is the local church in Jerusalem. But this just reinforces the point that effectively what's happened is Jerusalem still, and Antioch not. Antioch has gone into a different thing, but Jerusalem and Alexandria are effectively just extensions of the Greek state. And so,
but if the Greek state suddenly decide, that's why we don't really worry that much. I remember even recently it was mentioned to me in the chat that there was a protest vote in the Greek parliament to switch the national church to the GOC. But that would effectively give the GOC of Greece control over Greece, Jerusalem. These things are in that kind of flux where we have no idea what's going to happen, but we just keep rebuilding where we can. So these are things that we take seriously, and I think that we're gonna see more things. But yeah, the Greek flag flying there now. Unfortunately, that's the Brotherhood of the Holy Sepulchre. It's been around 100 years. It's keep the Holy Land Greek, but I mean it's not going to work, and it isn't working. So
yeah, well, I mean, and you also get the problem where all the Arab Palestinian Christians sort of thing, and they're all from the Gaza or West Bank or something like that. You're not seeing all the locals. So yeah, I did find that problematic. Now, one of the for me actually one of the biggest. Right, so just a couple of issues I was still going to address about the so-called new calendar, the mainstream churches, the patriarchal churches. Let's call them patriarchal churches,
right.
As against the true Orthodox, is for me one of the key questions. Whether you remove or stay, is can I continue in without sort of becoming defrocked and teaching the faith of the apostolic faith, obeying the apostolic canons and things as from the 7 ecumenical councils, as sort of I can take the 8 ecumenical councils, etc.
Do you think we don't believe in those?
Conscience, teach that and preach that without actually being in conflict with the hierarchy and defrocked because I am teaching something wrong or to not continue to do this. And so that's basically, for me, the litmus test is if it gets to a stage where you cannot continue to teach and preach and practice very strong practice the apostolic faith according to the canons, then yes, that becomes a place that would be impossible to continue as it couldn't be the church because that would be a contradiction to the traditional church. Of course, then you have the distinction between your personal bishop's particular problem on that, which is always bad, and the whole institutional problem. Now, another aspect which has happened, and I think one of the biggest troubles of Meletius was when they made all the bishops metropolitans. This was a huge power grab by Constantinople because according to Canon 28, he only had right to ordain the metropolitans. The metropolitans dealt with the synods underneath them and ordained all the bishops who are proper bishops, and all the actual functions of the church day to day are run by metropolitan synods, not by the patriarch. The patriarch's a court of appeal. He deals with certain things.
Right.
But when they made all the bishops metropolitans, it means the patriarch ordained everyone. And suddenly you stop having these synods with an appeal court above it. You have one synod now under the patriarch who ordains all the bishops in the patriarchate, and there's no appeal court. And so what happens, as my experience, is you get old boys clubs. So there's no now priest deals with the Council of 12 bishops and his metropolitans, and then he can appeal above that to stop an old boys clubs forming because he's got multiple metropolitans underneath the patriarch. You now got all the bishops and very few really, in the case of Antioch, under in a single synod under the patriarch. And this was the greatest affront to the apostolic tradition, as much as any of the calendar was this absolute change of what the traditional positions like.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I don't know that I don't know that I would consider a change in juridicism the same as a change in the calendar. A change in the calendar affects every single member of the church from the top to the bottom.
Oh, this does as well, effectively.
Well, not really.
And then you get the rise of all these sort of assistant bishops and stuff. It was a power grab by the ecumenical patriarch.
But there are still diocesan councils, and there are still like diocesan tribunals to handle a single priest without ever going to the patriarch. In some cases, there are diocesan councils and tribunals. These are roughly analogous to what you're discussing.
The metropolitans.
No, metropolitan councils. Like, in other words, that there's metropolitan tribunals run by the metropolitan. These exist. They can even
gathering of a synod of bishops in the area, and they come under the metropolitan, calls the bishops together, 12 bishops to hear the case of a presbytery.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the size of the synod, and it's not common. Really, the only place where it would be, justified until you have a majority Christian population is probably Russia.
Serbia kept the structure, traditional structure.
Yeah,
they're going to change it to Greek, and then they decided not to. But it is in the front of the tradition. The tradition is having these three hierarchies, so it's opposed to the tradition. It's in the front of the apostolic tradition. To overturn us. Now, what its practical effect is another matter. As you say, the calendar. Well, I'm not so fussed about the calendar. I don't mind the new. Publicly, I've got to be careful exactly where I sort of say. But look, I prefer the old calendar. I'd far sooner be on it. Just its relationship to the Paschal calendar is much better, and so our feast day, my little parish, would always fall after Pascha,
well,
as opposed to not halfway through.
Also, the Typicon and the Old Western Ordos, etc., all base the yearly calculation around the Paschal calculation. You can't do that with the new calendar. It's impossible.
It gets messed up. So I'm totally, but in the sense of whether that in itself is sufficient to, I'm not of the opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that either. Although if you're willing to kill people over it, then yeah, I do have a problem.
Oh yeah, people are wanting to do that. So then what was the? Sorry, I'm just blabbering on here. Now, one of my critiques of the old calendar movement, and where my experience is Sphygmenu, is I went to there's actually a couple of critiques. One is I went this, and I just got the feel all they were worried about is ecumenism, and just like
it's a big problem.
This is just too narrow focused. It's just ecumenism, and everything, all the literature is ecumenism and stuff. Something fell off with this. Now, if you go to Vatapati, they're not ecumenists, or you more particularly if you go to Philotheu or Karakalu monasteries, they're definitely anti-ecumenists in this sense. They're definitely keeping the canons of a church, but you're not focused on ecumenism. It's not the issue. It's about get on with the spiritual life sort of thing. So this is one of the things I've met with old canons. It's sometimes, not all, but there's sometimes a little bit of an over narrow focus.
Now, you're aware that Sphygmenu has been under blockade, which means that they can't even receive packages legally.
Oh yeah, no, but I visited this way, or at least it had been about 15, 16 years ago, when I was on Mount Athos, if not before that. So when I first I'm not sure when I first visited it, but 15.
They probably wouldn't complain. Yeah, they probably wouldn't complain to an outsider about it. But the point is, the patriarch had wanted to starve them out of there for the past 30 years. So they would have been about 10, 15 years in by then.
Yeah. But anyway, just the literature on the side. So that's something one of the worries I had about when you start moving off from this. And you can see it's sort of the Donatists and stuff. You sort of get single issue focused, and that can be dangerous for the spiritual life of the people. It's got to keep balanced. The other critique I had, which disappointed me, was I personally, my position is obedience to the canons. Let's keep the traditions of the church and obey the canons. And when I see the old calendars doing one canon and then disobeying another 5 or 6, or being totally ignorant of them, it's sort of like, oh no, why would I want to join one group who's disobeying some canons and go to another group who's disobeying different canons. What you talk about truth and all this. Yeah, where do we draw the lines? It's like James says, you disobey one, you disobey the lot. So that's another concern, is how good and well trained are a lot of the bishops in the Old Covenant movement. How much is people working to make sure that the people actually knowing and doing it, not just taking, having a nice, I've got all this power and stuff like that, but they're actually more just as ignorant as the so-called new
Well,
calendar.
Unseen Warfare has a good question. He said, what canons are they disobeying? I assume he's talking about the true Orthodox. What canons are we disobeying, he says.
Oh, well, just one of it caught me back in past as like a subdeacon saying, I can get married and then continue on to be a deacon and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, no.
No, well, that can only, according to the canon, that can only happen in extreme cases with the permission of the bishop beforehand. But I've never heard of a case in recent history where that was passed.
No, good. But I'm just this is one of the things that I'm saying. Now, maybe that there is a canonical obedience, and that is most welcome. But so that's to me is one of the things is are they really keeping? I think as you're saying with the bishops, etc., you're settling down into actually probably more traditional things. You are recognizing metropolitans and bishops more. You're not following on this change, which I was just
Orthodox Traditionalist Publications as new calendarists ordain unmarried subdeacons all the time. Okay.
Yeah, maybe they do. I don't actually. A lot of times you calendarists say I have to bury my head in my hands. No, my question is not is that the new calendarists are doing everything right. I agree with the old calendarist tradition. Critique on most of things is whether it's justified to break from what I see as a clear tradition of the patriarch, the important centralization of the patriarchs, whether that's justified on that to move away there. And as I said, you're no longer able to actually practice the canonical obedience in the church. And then there's the next question, the justification. Whether the old calendarist groups have sufficiently established themselves as a synod that has got coherently enough apostolic tradition. Okay, you've got no patriarchs. Well, okay, that raises another question. And yeah, so that's more the issue. But certainly, new calendar churches have got lots of problems.
This is, Father Verkey says, why is the GOCK bishop fully vested giving relics to a new calendarist bishop? Well, that's not technically a mystery, even though that's not a good thing. But they did address that. It had something to do with the feast and the maintenance of the building of the city. So I'm not sure. I'm not going to go much further than that. Cornelius is the only people who permit subdeacons to marry the OCA. Reader John says, I think he needs to spend time with a true Orthodox priest and sort out these issues. Father Verkey says, Tom, I don't know why you keep saying it like that. We were discussing, to my knowledge, 1993. Tom says, why are you sympathizing MP Verkey? Unseen Warfare says, having a Patrick that's an ecumenist or worse than not having one. Okay.
That's a good question, whether it is worse or not. A bad.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's one. Well, again, it comes down to how important are the patriarchs as a center of communion of the churches. And,
I would agree with that.
Whether this communion of this role can actually continue to function to be useful, even if they're with harlots and all the rest of it, sort of thing, but nevertheless, the function of the thing. It doesn't say in the canon that if he's sleeping with a harlot, you have to abandon him. He doesn't say that.
Right, yeah.
It's only if he's teaching heresy. So in other words, that's another really important thing for me as well, is the orthodoxy of a synod, to me, is based on what does a bishop need to confess before he is ordained. So what councils, what canons, etc., is he confessing at his ordination? If you introduce a heresy at that level, then he's confessing the heresy in his ordination. Therefore, you've ceased to be an Orthodox ecclesial body at this stage. While
Right.
you're still only confessing the obedience, as I say, the Seven Ecumenical Council, and they do promise to obey all the canons. I mean,
Yeah.
they've read this, what they've promised. But as long as that, again, is still Orthodox, then it's another thing to say, right, that is not a justification yet.
Cornelio asks, to what jurisdiction does Father Patrick belong? Just asking out of curiosity.
Patriarch of Antioch in the UK, Diocese of the UK.
Okay, Orthodox Traditionalist Publication says last year an EP bishop confessed the filioque. Remember, that's true. That was in the U.S.
What was that?
Apparently, I forget whether it was the dedication of a church or something like that, but the EP bishop literally read the creed with the filioque in it.
Oops. Was it? Oh, I think I remember that. Was
Yeah.
that was just not an accident or something? I mean,
Like, how does a Greek
bishop make an accident like that? There's complete ignorance. Really.
Well, it's a Greek bishop, which makes even less sense because in the U.S. the Greek Archdiocese bishops mostly read the creed in Greek. Like, there's very few editions that have the filioque in Greek. So, for him to get so used to it that he's saying the filioque regularly.
Now, actually, can I ask a question about the
Yeah.
how are you? One of the big scandals for the patriarchal churches at the moment is in the US, in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the diaspora. There is multiple bishops from different patriarchates in the same territory, which is basically pushing their own ethnic, their own peculiar practices, which are proper to their territory, say in Romania, Serbia, etc., into another territory where they have no justification to be there canonically, which is actually means that conversion to these churches means identifying with a localized custom from somewhere else, which means you can never have a truly local church in the UK and the US, because you're either having to become Greek or Russian or Serbian, and according to their ecclesiastical customs, which they have in their countries. And then the churches advise, I prefer Russian style this, I prefer Greek style this, I prefer Romanian style this. This is a division of the one church. Now, that's distinct from one patriarch, say in Africa, bringing in a Greek style across all of the African churches as a base style in which you develop a local lifestyle somewhere else. That's a distinct matter. But when you've got all these different groups coming in, that is a scandal. And all people say, there's actually 5 different Orthodox churches. They're not there's not one Catholic church as such. We've got the Romanian. And so for me, this is, how are the old calendarists addressing this? Are you trying to make sure that you're not sort of overlapping each other all over the place, that you are respecting localized customs, traditions? Are you trying to build a local church in each place?
No, I would say that we still have that problem because we're just trying to recover total ecclesiastical unity first before we can even do that. I think that to some degree we've respected the principles slightly more, but not much better to try to fix that. But it's sometimes it comes out in the wash. One group ends up becoming the dominant group there anyway. Orthodox Traditionalist Publication says, question for Father Patrick: if you're with Antioch, how do you justify the synodal patriarchate approving the Eucharistic communion with the Monophysites?
Good question. Now, I'm actually not exactly sure what their present position is. I tried to ask in a letter and I didn't get a reply. So I'm not quite sure. Now, I know that some priests believe that it's okay in the UK to to commune. I suppose they wouldn't call them monophysites, but yeah, let's say
Meow, you could call them meophysites. Non-Chalcedonians is fine, yeah.
Yeah, non-Chalcedonians. Those who reject the Council of Chalcedon and are not willing to accept it, in which case they are anathematized. So, if there is a case in that, I don't see any proper justification for it. However, due to political circumstances, due to persecution, due to problems of space in Syria, in Lebanon, for example, there might be some sort of economic problem where this is necessitated by some of the circumstances on the ground. I can't speak for that because I don't live there. I don't know the places. So perhaps I don't see one off the top of my head what may justify this, but I could argue that there could be some form of local problem that this is seeking to address, which is what I think partly is what happened in '93 when they made this. How much they're actually keeping that now and how much that's just gone out under the water, I don't know. Our priests, or some of them, are picking up that this is still okay here. I don't see any justification in the UK, for example, to do this economy over there. And this is one of the problems I'm referring to about churches that are uncanonically in different territories, bringing their localized problems and issues and economies to another country where they cease to apply, but they're only applying because you're part of that jurisdiction, of that patriarchate. And that I find is extremely problematic. So I don't know if there's any justification. John of Damascus says if you commune with, give communion to them, you are communing with them because it's a physical bond. If they're willingly given communion, you're in the communion of the heretics. Now, if I push that too far, of course, then yes, all the ecumenical patriarch, everyone staying in communion with Antioch would be in communion with the monophysite. So you could argue that the whole of patriarchal orthodoxy, because they have done it, no one else has condemned them and tacitly accepted it, is therefore in communion with monophysites. Or you could take it narrowly, it's only the priest who actually gives the communion, which is probably my personal take at the moment, is that it's only the priest who does that, who's in the communion with him, because he's the one who's actually given them the communion. So you've got to be careful not to push things too far out. But yes, I don't see any justification, especially not outside maybe a very peculiar circumstances in some of those areas where I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Let me see here. Unseen War of Prayer says we can't be super focused on the letter of the canons instead of the spirit behind them. We're decentralized. The church has always been this way. Cornelio Mihel Magrano says, I know that at St. Albans in the UK, they commune monophysite Syriacs. Unseen Warfare says economy can't accept heresy. Orthodox traditional publications. This happens in the Western countries all the time. Individual priests may or may not adhere to the practice. However, this is the official position of Antioch. How can there be economy when they're ecumenically condemned? Black Ortho Acolyte says, I don't understand how it's possible. Ortho Pirate says, economy never breaks the canons. Orthodox Traditionalist Publication says, if the Patriarchal Synod confessed that the entire Patriarchate is in heresy with those ecumenically condemned heretics. Okay, that's, let me see here. And your entombment is signed by a bishop of the Synod who confessed this. Memento Mori says, I'm glad Father Patrick came on to have a civil discussion. Often not too many people, whether clergy or laity from World Orthodox, even want to have a discussion. That's also very true. All right, so now let me ask you a question. Were there other parts of the film you wanted to cover? Or because I think we've covered we've covered a bit of ground already.
I'm just sort of exploring my ideas, pushing them out for you to sort of feedback your opinions and stuff. Have you got any more thoughts or from your point of view, because you watched it?
No, I mean, I think that a lot. I think it's worth watching. If you're new to the subject, obviously, from those true Orthodox watching it will be like, this is here. This is, like we'd be critical of it, as rightly we should. So I think it's worth reviewing. It's but I think that having us discuss this directly is actually helpful. Zelotes, may God bless you. Let me see here. And okay, the Father Verky and Cornelia have been talking throughout the whole thing, so I don't want to interrupt their conversation. But yeah, in any case, you're always welcome on the show to discuss. We have we do a live Q&A every Sunday. So, if you have more questions about us, you sent me some very interesting Western Rite documents. I did pass them on to the bishop. We probably will have some things to say. It'll be interesting because we're working on a lot of stuff. Zolota says too much economy leads to bankruptcy. Greek guy speaks. Very true.
Yeah. No, economy. You got to be very careful of economy.
Well,
and it's
funny he said that. Huh?
Well, economy can't become a rule.
Yeah.
Well, I know. Actually, I make some exceptions to this. So you've got to be very careful here. So generally, economy can't be a rule. It is a case by case basis on a particular situation at a particular time. Now, I think people got to be careful what the Antiochians actually confesses and teaches, and what some of those documents signed and stuff, and trying to lift them into as if it's actual confession of faith and stuff. We've got to be very careful.
I can put them up, but basically what it comes out to is the intro paragraphs treat them as sister churches, and the rules that are at the end allow for common concelebration of priests at a wedding, common concelebration of priests when a bishop of one or the other group arrives, and how they're supposed to arrange it. If that, for all intents and purposes, it is like how to concelebrate with these people.
Yeah, but it's just sort of deliberately shy of actual full recognition and stuff, which is important.
Except for the marriage part.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother thing. But marriages are going crazy all over the place. In any case, now what was? I had another. The Canon economy. Yes. Now, one of the exceptions of that is the economy in the canons vis-a-vis baptism, with the Arians, Novitians, and stuff, where the economy of receiving by chrism rather than baptizing in is given to 5 or 6 groups in that canon, which is a standing economy to be a rule that these groups are to be received in such and such a way.
And none of these groups exist anymore.
Of course. So all gone. But I'm just pointing out that there is the occasional time where the fathers have set as a rule a specific what would be otherwise an economy, as you see in St. Basil when he talks about this. So there are some exceptions of economy vis-a-vis rule, but overall, generally, economy is always a case-by-case basis, and should never become a sort of standing policy, because then it becomes a rule, and then you effectively overturn the canons of the church. And that's one of the problems of Crete when it starts talking about marriage and stuff like that, and effectively trying to overturn Canon 72, which forbids marriage outside the church. And if I have my little rant on that, there's a good reason why we shouldn't be married outside the church. There is no marriage, but basically, it's the bottom line. No marriage in the mystical sense.
Let me see here. Orthodox Christians publications. I do appreciate the Father Patrick brings academic seriousness. Denise says, it seems so tangled up. I'm thoroughly confused at this point. I have much to learn and will do best to do so. God bless. Cornelia Magarani says, this has been a more easily to follow discussion than the one with Father John and Father Peter. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Orthodox Traditionalist Publications, it's a confession of faith in essence, couple that with the WCC signed documents. It's a confession of faith. Paragraph 9 is a 100% a full recognition. Tom says, too bad his academic seriousness isn't the pious one which brings the light. Or the Pirate says, the rule is never called economia. That's a totally different word for that. And so you're probably thinking of akrivea, which is strictness. Katerina Ambrose says, I think it's good to bring both sides of the argument. Your honest answers. So often discussion is stifled. Orthodoxy needs to remain orthodox. Otherwise, how can it be respected as such? Very good point, Saul. But yeah, I mean, the simple fact is, if economy is used all the time, it is the rule. And if it's the rule, there is no economy. We are now in the 54th minute of the second hour, and Black Ortho Acolyte drops another. Thank you for the super chat, the $4.99. Does Father Patrick accept the Rocor anathemas on ecumenism?
Oh, that's a good question. Basically, I'm not. I don't put myself as having formally that they are binding on me in a sense. So I'm not under Rocor. It's an overall push towards what they're trying to say. Yes, I agree with those things. It's sort of difficult. I'm very much a position that the church is based around the hierarchy of the bishops. There is no baptism, etc. There is no mysteries outside the boundary of church, as St. Cyprian of Carthage teaches, as the fathers have taught, and therefore any relation with those outside must be with those outside the church. So anything that's starting to assume that they somehow have baptism, they've somehow sort of got a hierarchy of a church or anything like that. Yeah, or calling them, I mean, if I've been really strict, calling them Christians is inappropriate. Athanasius the Great says really a Christian is one who is bound to Christ, united in the church. And those outside cannot take a name. That's why we call them by heretic. The names are heretic, the leaders, the Arians, and all the rest of these things. But at an academic level, in a play, I'm not opposed to saying that in the sort of secular usage of a name in other contexts. But strictly speaking, it's not. So when they Crete, they make the sort of claim that they're Christians outside. Whoa, what are you talking about? Even before we get to the word church. So yeah. It starts to talk about those things. Yes, I'm fully on side of the Rocor position.
Okay. Katerina Ambrose says, Father, you were talking about a film. What's it called, please? I don't remember talking about a film. I think this may be some confusion with the Father Peter Here's thing that I was reviewing yesterday, but that was them. I had nothing to do with it. And are you working on a film, Father Patrick?
No, not that I'm sure.
That's okay. Me neither. All right. He's both yes and no, man. Mental disaster. Tom. Well, I mean, people are confused by these things. So, the priests aren't priests aren't automatically imbued with massive wisdom. Unseen Warfare says, we're talking about the anathema against ecumenism. Do you think Christ loosed the anathema in heaven? Does that not make it universal?
Well, that gets tricky. Whether Rocor, when it's made its anathema, is Christ speaking through it as an ecumenical, at the level of an ecumenical council, that it binds all churches. Now, it may be true. Maybe Christ did speak through it, etc. Maybe there is an anathema which
that's how we see it. Yeah.
But there's also, if you've a history of church, that is local, and until it gets to actually be pronounced, I don't have to take it as binding on myself because it could be wrong. At this stage, I tend to agree with it. Perhaps he's done, but because it's just a local synod, and Rocor itself canonically has its own issues, especially since its rapprochement with Moscow Patriarch in 2007. Its justification to be canonically is extremely dodgy now.
Unless, I said unless, because it's possible that by abandoning the practical application of the anathema, that may be a result of falling under Sergianism.
Who knows exactly what's going on there? I'm not so worried about Sergianism, but yeah.
Weird John says, Father better watch it. He might become true Orthodox.
I would say I already am true Orthodox.
Black Ortho Acolyte says, when Father Patrick says it's not binding.
I've got a heresy.
When Father Patrick says it's not binding, does he believe the anathema only applies to Rocor?
It's difficult. It's sort of it's a jurisdictional thing that you can pass sentences and stuff which only as good as a sin of the bishops who's passed it for binding sense. It doesn't bind other sinners because they weren't involved in the decision. So it hasn't passed the sense of widespread acceptance, truth, establishment, testing it and trying it. So, but nevertheless, itself could be absolutely true. So we've got the local synods and like that, ASEA and stuff, which are recognized by the Ecumenical Council as being basically putting canons which are ecumenically binding, even if canons of individual father have that authority, because they're recognized as truly representing the apostolic tradition, and therefore they're binding on things. So I'm speaking in two ways. Yes, I can some ways say that the anathemas of Roko are true for all, but in another say I can say not yet. I'm not sure because we haven't been tested across all the churches and there. So I have to keep that distinction.
Well, that unseen warfare goes right for that distinction. He says if the world Orthodox churches don't accept it, they risk falling under it.
Oh, that's true. That's very true that they could fall under it if it's correct. But as I say, because it's only being passed by one small synod, we can't absolutely apply it necessarily through all churches and say, yeah, that is absolutely true. We have to go through the proper test.
On the World Core Anathema, Orthodox Traditionalist publication says they fell under their own anathema.
Oh, that's for the World Core.
Yeah, in 2007, yeah. Unseen Warfare says, of course, the ecumenist jurisdictions aren't going to accept it. They refuse to leave the WCC.
Don't know what they're doing in the WCC. It's a Protestant.
But then, I mean, it's a fair question that if the anathema against ecumenism encapsulated basically implies you have to leave the WCC, how can we possibly expect that they're going to be anathematized against it when they're part of this massive international supra church?
Yeah. Well, that's right. They're not going to take up these anathemas, and so they're not going to deal with it. So, yeah. So in a broader sense, they've been made. I assume they're true to a large degree, but the patriarchal church is not going to deal with it. So, it seems at Crete they basically said opposite wise. So Crete's actually, but becomes their problematic councils when they start speaking.
Well, Crete did talk about like non-Orthodox as part of the church.
Yeah. That's right. So that council does start getting problematic in that sense. Yeah. And especially when they start claiming it as an ecumenical council. Mm-hmm. It's not fully recognized as such because Antioch doesn't agree with it. That hasn't signed up to it. It doesn't mean it hasn't agreed with it. It hasn't signed up to it. Russia didn't sign up to it. Bulgaria didn't sign up to it. So, but I just tried to ask one of the ecumenical patriarch monasteries whether you are forced to actually believe it in the ecumenical patriarch. And they said they don't. I think maybe it's some sort of tacit exception, but they don't actually know. So I'm not sure if even they think it's binding on themselves. So anyway.
Okay, Cornelia Mayo Magrinu says, yes, Roquefort MP has updated the 1983 anathema since the rapprochement to encompass Freemasons, so at least the argument that they weren't in communion at the time of the original one won't apply. Not really much of a question. You are in heresy, Patrick. Welcome to Straight Reality. So let's skip that one. Does Father Patrick believe St. Justin Popovich was correct in referring to it as the worst heresy of all?
Right. Well, I'm not sure what exactly has been with ecumenism. I'm not quite sure exactly what the heresy is, except in a sense it's the worst of all because what he may be meaning is it's basically saying it doesn't matter to have any heresy. We will accept you as sort of Christians because you carry the label Christian on you. And because in the 1960s, someone stuck the word Orthodox on your name list from some perspective that you are suddenly now Orthodox Christians in the case of, say, the Copts or the Syrians or the Ethiopians. So in this sense, it's the ecumenism. It's sort of recognizing heretics as being Christians and being in some form of communion with the church is worse than all heresies because it's basically denying the problem all heresies have, which is the separation from Christ. And so in that sense, it's basically saying, oh, it doesn't matter to be heresy. So at that level, yes, it is worst.
Let me see here. Justin Popovich is not a Saint Tio. Stop that Greek Cypriot. Okay, this is more of a Serbian discussion. I'm not going to have it here. From Agata says again, this has been a great discussion. Thank God. Question: when World Orthodox is a parallel church, old calendars, how can in all clarity can this be said? The OC left because of the infection of heresy or ecumenism.
Right at this level, I'm talking just about parallel hierarchies. Now, of course, if one of the other is absolutely correct, then the other hierarchy is not actually the church. It's a schism, or it's heretical. But I'm just talking about the sense of the two hierarchical structures. And I mention that in the sense that I'm not seeing in the true Orthodoxy that there has been sort of like one patriarchate which is standing against the other, and then sort of trying to coordinate the sort of the bishops elsewhere, in a sense. So it's a detached from a sort of the up till 1923 common communion of the churches, and it's become sort of detached as a separate thing, which has almost been fueled by the Rokor.
Well, are you talking about the 1923 Pan-Orthodox Council?
Hmm?
The 1923 Pan-Orthodox Council was barely a council. It was.
Oh, I just mentioned 23 because that's when the calendar changes. This is when
right. That's when a lot of the changes.
But before that, we all happily agreed.
Yeah, so, it was that was like the robber council. Antioch has agreed to many heretical statements which are binding and required for their own membership in that heretical organization. How can we continue to sideline these facts?
Well, I am part of the Antioch, and I've never had to sign up to any of those statements. I've never been asked by the bishop to sign up to them or anything like that. So, so to be a priest. So if I'm dead otherwise, then I'll let you know. But that is not actually the situation I'm aware of.
Tony Orthodox, but wasn't St. Justin under the EP's jurisdiction? Last I checked, under Mount Athos is under the EP. No, he wasn't.
Mount Athos is fascinating. The ecumenical patriarch is their own bishop.
But St. Justin was living in Serbia when he died. That's nonsense. St. Justin was the heresy is claiming no one church exists. It's in the name World Council of Churches. Agreed. Orthodox Christians publication. Father Patrick, that's exactly what these WCC documents are stating. Okay, ecumenism is technically a pan-heresy. Does Father Patrick believe pre-union Rokor were schismatic?
Before MP?
Right.
No, in the sense that there was a justification for their continuing to sort of hold the Church of Russia, the traditions of the hierarchy of the Church of Russia outside Russia due to the problems of communism. And I'm not going to go into whether the Serbian is or whatever, but I think there's a legitimate reason. Just as the Church of Cyprus for some time settled in a communion just outside Constantinople or up with the Thracia or something like that for a while because of invasions into Cyprus, of Arab invasions, before they sort of shifted back into their own territory again. So Rokor, in a sense, was in a sort of a strange position vis-a-vis it wasn't in a totally canonical position, but there was a justification for it being in its position. Serbia sort of accepted, gave them place. So to continue the hierarchy of Russia to go back. Once you get to the MP thing, then that means that they've recognized that the church is established in Russia. Therefore, there's no longer any justification for the Rokor to exist outside. They have no territorial reason to be anywhere. They are not a territory. They are preserving the hierarchy of Russia for the church, the territory of Russia, because the territory of Russia is under communism. As soon as you go to the rapprochement, the reason to be for Rokor to exist completely vanishes. And they're sort of a parasite church sitting on top of other people's territories. And so, yeah, they've lost any canonical ground to.
Well, I would counter that to some degree, because I agree with the ultimate principle, but not for the reason that you're stating. In the late 80s and early 90s, Rokor helped establish the hierarchy in Russia. There was the Free Russian Orthodox Church that eventually became the ROAC and the Artok, encompassing thousands of people, if not millions, that are true Orthodox in Russia with their own bishops, because they couldn't keep obeying from Russia. It was like the Russian Orthodox Church inside Russia from outside Russia inside Russia. It made no sense. So from our perspective, there didn't need to be many felt that there didn't need to be a Russian church abroad anymore. Obviously, there are still many Russian church abroad continuing members who are not in communion with EP who clearly don't agree with that, and that's okay. Unseen Warfare says you might not have to personally sign up, but your hierarchy has, and everything flows down from the synod.
Well, again, what matters is the ordination prayers for the bishop. And in fact, part of the ordination prayers, yes, then it comes. That's a mystery. That is what is it. Now, whether the synods and stuff, these political documents and stuff, I don't consider these as statements of faith that are binding. Yeah, they're problematic, and yes, arguments could try to be made there. But I think you've got to be careful to distinguish between the actual confessions of faith, which are made, the actual doctrines which are formally expected or taught of the bishops and the presbyters, and those documents signed up by the bishops in some capacity or another.
Orthodox Traditional's publication says, "Are we Presbyterians? Your bishops run the church. That's not an answer. You serve the pleasure of your bishop via his antiments." Okay. In other words, I guess,
no. Well, that's not correct. The antiments are a portable altar, which is not a permission or just serving the bishop. The presbyter is a priest in his own right. He can only serve with consent of his bishop. There is a consent because they keep the unity of the priesthood. And so a presbyter can't operate by himself. He can't act on his own will in this sense apart from
because the ultimately
but it doesn't mean he's a representative of the bishop. He is a priest in his own right. He is a governor. He sits on this throne on beside the priest. He rules with the bishop. This is important because this is the mystery of the priesthood, is representing our rule with Christ eternally. Christ sits on the throne, ruled with the elders. We rule with Christ. He doesn't sort of sit there and sort of just use people as puppets. We generally sit down and rule with them. So the presbyter has a general authority to govern the church. As St. John Chrysostom says, the only difference is that the bishop ordains to keep the unity of the priesthood.
Yeah.
But he doesn't control the priesthood. So the antiments is just simply a portable altar. And once you've got an old consecrated altar, you don't need the antiments anymore. You have an elative, a cloth, which is things
well,
like
this is what he's
all these ideas, but yeah, we've got to be careful to unpack that.
Yeah, OTP says if he strips you of your antiments, you're not serving. We believe as our hierarch believes.
Yeah, that's been tied up now with the consent. They will take your antiments away. Well, take away the altar. I can't serve without being serving on an altar consecrated by a bishop. Now, technically, I could serve on the altar by the previous bishop. The bishop doesn't have to come back and reconsecrate a consecrated altar every time. And once it's been consecrated through that diocese. But then there is a consent. If he says I can't serve anymore, he refuses to let me serve. Okay, I can't serve. That's fine. Doesn't mean he can order me what to believe or whatever, or that his beliefs are automatically mine. No, that's a different matter.
Okay, let me see here. If Rokor wasn't schismatic back then, were the churches that were in communion with non-schismatic also? I guess that's a reference to the Greek Old Calendarists. So in other words, if Rokor wasn't uncanonical, wouldn't that mean that the True Orthodox of Greece, Romania, Bulgaria were also not uncanonical?
Oh, this is one of the hopes of the True Calendarists, was simply because Rokor was, well, of course, the argument is interesting. If you're relying on Roke being non-schismatic vis-a-vis the patriarchates, then are you saying that the true Orthodox Church is only good as so long as it can trace itself and continue back to the patriarchs? However, having said my argument originally, what you got to keep traced back to the patriarchs, then you could say, right, this establishes a connection back to the patriarchs, so that the hierarchy is not formed ex nihilo, is sort of out of nothing. It is actually formed from the patriarchal recognized jurisdictions, even if it's had to separate from them eventually. At least it can trace its establishment into the continuing heritage of the patriarchs from the before. So yes,
right.
that is.
Katerina Amor says, Father Joseph, do Orthodox baptize everyone to join them, or is it variable as it is in mainstream Orthodoxy? It's not nearly as variable. If they came from a putatively Orthodox jurisdiction, there's going to be some variation, but if they didn't, it's usually baptism. Father Joseph, are you part of our talk or a different one? I am not part of our talk. What?
Can I ask a tricky question online? What
Sure.
is your synod's and maybe a general or kind of position to? So generally, it sounds like you if someone's baptized in the patriarchal churches, you receive that by chrism. There, are you double checking whether there's been just a sort of some priest just sprinkle on their head or something like that?
Yeah, we've actually been all true Orthodox jurisdictions have actually been reviewing that based on videos, so on and so forth. We've noticed that certain jurisdictions at this point are no longer really doing baptism. We've seen everything from a baby getting its head thrown in to its feet thrown in, but never the full body, to
at least it's immersion of the head. At least the immersion of the head.
Yeah, but then we've seen Monophysites who have just literally baptized the baby's bottom, and that's not a baptism. We've seen a few different weird things, but yeah, we're trying our best. But baptism is always the norm, and so we're going to go strict because we're just seeing massive chaos. Yeah. Tom writes an interesting point. He says, you do not need antimons in times of extreme persecution. Catacombs save served by the grace of God alone on the bodies of the dying martyrs. So grace is everything. You just need the priest. Wrong. And I'll tell you why you're wrong. And you actually said it right there when you said the catacomb saints served by the grace of God alone on the bodies of the dying martyrs. If you were familiar with an antimension contains a tiny relic in it that connects it to the rest of the church. That is why a priest could say a liturgy on the top of a body of a martyr, because that was the original tradition, was to say services on top of the tombs of the martyrs, and the antimension comes from that. What you're describing is just going closer back to the original practice, but you can't do a service that is not connected to the church via physical means. Black Ortho Acolyte, if the world Orthodox becomes totally ecumenistic and professes it, would Father Patrick be inclined to believe ecumenism is true, or that the true Orthodox may have been correct?
Well, going on to the canons of which we talked about from the start, the priority is the faith, that the apostolic tradition and the faith. So that is the priority I'd follow on. So my question about true Orthodox is, has it passed the threshold to justify their position? But I'm definitely of opinion that there is a threshold that can justify.
Right, and that's the thing what he's asked about. Like, if ecumenism just becomes
so
bad.
So if it got to a stage where I was forced to have to practice and deny the apostolic tradition, that I just simply couldn't, any good conscience, continue in that sense. It's just open contradiction, left, right, and center, and I'm forced to have to do that. Then yes, I would sooner go with the tradition than continuing with that. Of course, I've got two paths. I can do the Father Matthew Volinescu, just simply stop recognizing, or there's a true Orthodox type path. That is the options out there. But it'll have to be pretty bad before these things get there. Now, it may be getting that bad, but I don't know. But anyway, yes, I would prefer to go in the direction of a true Orthodox rather than preaching and teaching heresy or being when it's absolutely forced upon them. Yeah.
Orthodox traditionalist publications. So, how are you separating what your lawful patriarch synod has decreed as not applicable to you as to their priest? In other words, I guess what he's saying is when they issue ecumenistic statements, how are you able to just reject them?
I just take them as not being. I just take them as political documents, as I sign it, are not binding on the my teaching in the parish or in my sermons, etc. Perhaps you could argue that I should take them more seriously. Good point. I tend to just ignore them as sort of political documents. I don't see them as being confessed when you are in faith, statement of faith. But yeah, I might have to examine exactly what documents have what. Well, as I said, I've tried to ask some of these questions. They haven't responded to me. So, yeah.
All right. No, I wouldn't. He says no. I would only say no systematic just because there weren't heretics, not because of connection to Patrick's. Just to clarify. Victor M says the key is to see human-made systems as invalid or more like non-existent or only made by more or less ambitious bishops or men. And then John O.C. says, or as I heard from those present, priest served liturgy on his own chest. I assume in that case he was dying. You were wrong, Father. Those dying saints were martyrs, Father. They are the Anathemas and Holy Table. I'm not wrong. You're not disagreeing with me at all. But isn't this a denial of Pentecost where the vast majority of Orthodox and error reduced to a minority in truth? The Holy Spirit has to guide the church into truth and protect it. That's just a variation of the Catholic argument. Ultimately Christianity has never been a majority in this country or in this world, I should say.
Yeah. I think you've got to be very careful with the numbers.
The numbers game is not a good game.
There is the case of the patriarchs, the remaining communion of the patriarchs is a slightly different case, but it's certainly nothing to do with the absolute numbers.
You'd be surprised at how many times we get the numbers argument. Let me see. Because as much as those theological fragments in World Orthodoxy, some schisms and absences of communion are just idiotic and a result of the devil's work. What about the Romanian holy new martyrs who suffered under communism? Lord have mercy. I have no idea.
Obviously, I'm not.
I realize not everyone's going to feel that way.
I do think there is a serious problem of the sort of some of the true Orthodox when you have got certain saints like St. Joseph of Hesychast and Paisius is got argued for, Porphyrius, Justin Martyr. So
Justin Martyr's first century. I think you're talking about Justin Popovich.
Popovich. Excuse me. Sorry, he's not a martyr. So Justin Popovich. So I think that these are sort of challenges to a true Orthodox position that perhaps there is still salvation, grace, and sanctity are possible. Now, actually, have you got what's your opinion on that particular point? I'd be interested to.
Well, I mean, with Saint Joseph of the Hesychast, we consider him our saint. So if you look, our hagiographies of him roughly match many New Calendarist ones, but there are differences in details on its question of who's telling the truth. I personally believe true Orthodox are telling the truth on that one. Elder Porphyrios, I have nothing to say. Elder Paisios, I really have nothing to say because there's been a massive cultus around him to the point where even when you note certain things where he's an error, like many true Orthodox have pointed out to prophecies that failed of Elder Paisios, but the reaction you get, and I'm sorry to say this, but especially it's more among the uneducated, is near demonic. Like, it's like they're grabbing the pitchforks like, you won't believe it, Paisios! And it's like, bro, like, no, he's just wrong.
This is a friend of mine critiques. A critique is actually some of the ecumenical patriarchs, the Greeks. There seems to be this sort of either you get some very sort of liberal, progressive ideas, or this sort of saint thing where sort of Paisius becomes a sort of the demigod is everything. I mean, not that this victim is the same, but it sort of gets a bit distorted out as just sort of like it's all about him, and if you dare to critique him, you're blasphemed, as you said.
So that's why I react the way I do. I realize that, obviously, they died for their faith, but the church has standards on how they recognize martyrs. That's the only reason why I say it that way, not to be rude to anyone. Katerina Ambrose asks, Father Joseph, are true Orthodox allowed to use an Anglican Roman Catholic church building and their altar for their liturgies in the absence of their own building? I would say if it's not out of ecumenical kindness, set up a rental agreement so that you have the rule of law determining if you're doing things. They may find out that you're anti-ecumenical, so on and so forth, and be like, you have to leave. You want the law on your side. Okay, I was just wondering if he has a breakpoint for tolerance of World Orthodox heresy. I appreciate his answer suggesting commitment to the faith and not to the establishment or elders. Okay, thumbs up. Or the pirate says they're not confessing these documents as aspects of the faith, then why are they signing them? I think that's a valid question. And he said they haven't responded. Well, the question Ortho Pirate asks here is, if they don't consider these as beneficial or valid for their faith, why sign documents that are clearly heretical?
Yeah. Look, I've got a good question. My personal position is, why on earth are they signing these documents? I'm just simply saying I don't believe that they're binding on myself or all the churches under the priests underneath them. However, there is, I'm a bit dumbfounded. Other than the potential, I don't know, I can't explain, but there could be political pressures, other pressures in the countries where literally they're at the point of death, they're at the point of starvation, their whole church would be destroyed, things like that. And so it may be better for the overall continuation of the church that you sign the document and just pretend, just push it out of the bird.
That's kind of the surgeonist answer, Father. I get it. The parents are starving, so on and so forth. Have you seen these WCC meetings? Because I guarantee you, there ain't no one starving in them. Like, that's not happening.
I'm just throwing out some sort of vague hope.
Yeah, no. We have YouTube for that now. They haven't responded because they agree with them. That's twice. Okay, I take my elder comment back. What part of England is Father from? I might have to share a cup of tea with him next time when I go over to there.
Well, I'm from New Zealand. Well,
I guess he's saying when he comes to the UK.
Let's put it this way. I live in Suffolk. If you want to have a cup of tea, I live in Suffolk in a little village called Long Melford.
All right. Spinach time. That voice scared me. Crazy New York. Okay, this must have been when I was talking about Elder Paisius. Alleged Saint Maria Scovia. Yeah, don't even get me started on Maria Scovia. In regards to new canonizations of Romanians, some of them were either massive ecumenists, like Father Dumitru, or a literal warlock. I did not know that Arsenia Boca was a warlock, or a persecutor of old calendar faithful, Father Cleope. I've heard of him. I'd love more details on those.
It's interesting talking to my Romanian friends, and there's a lot of scandal about this, and one of the problems is my concern is whether the ethnicity of a saint, their cultural heritage is becoming more important than their sanctity. So I'm starting to doubt whether the bishops are actually judging on the correct grounds. How much is this political? How much of these new saints are just simply...
that their minds are getting that. We've seen that with a lot of Constantinople canonizations. I wrote a whole article, Father Patrick, about these heretical documents your patriarchy signed. Please take a read. For the record, his website is orthodoxtraditionalist.com. Tom, that's right. Cornelius would not be surprised. Daniel also involved in persecuted Tio in the same process. Very possible. What is the proof of such claims, Cornelio? Maybe take that off chat because we're closing up shop here. It's impossible to discern anything via saints who chose world Orthodoxy or true Orthodoxy. These are saints of these churches literally because they chose those churches. World Orthodox wouldn't even knew them had they chose different. That's true. We have to, when we see disagreement among modern teachers, we have to go back further to understand what the original teaching was and then go from there. Was Olga Velasquez an ecumenist grandma? I don't know if Olga Velasquez was ecumenist, but she was an old lady. She was very nice and helped out victims of, sexual assault. I honestly, my issue isn't even ecumenism with that. I made the joke, and I still do occasionally make the joke, that there's always old ladies in parishes who think, everyone they like should be canonized. And often other ladies will think that they should be canonized. And so I just feel like it's like literally the meme coming to life. Like, I hate to put it that way. It's just maybe there was some striking virtue I'm missing. A few days ago, official heretic Canon canonized a lot of enemies of true Orthodoxy. Canonizing for political reasons has prevailed in world Orthodoxy. I'd say that to some okay.
It seems to be the case even from the inside.
Political, I feel like Olga's canonization had some DI baked in. I think that's unfair. Just because she's a little Native American grandma.
Yeah, well, this is where it gets difficult. Because you start talking about something political, then you start going overboard, and you start putting them all as political.
Now, you start wondering if is it all political.
You've got to be really careful here. Yeah. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily say no. I mean, I prefer to hold them in the sort of state of I'm not sure.
You leave it alone. Let's just leave it alone.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in any case, that is the end of it. I am closing off the comments now. So if you type in anything after that, it won't matter. No offense. Nope. You're too late. You're too late. You will have to answer each other. No, and no. That's it. Done. Because I wanted this to go 2 hours. It's we're on 2.5.
Yeah. We've got.
And so I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Father Patrick, our guests, to our listeners, to those with questions, to those with comments, for the super chats, and for those who support our mission. Support the channel. We at NFTU need your help. Support us by subscribing or donating at nftu.net, on Give, Send, Go, or on Odyssey. We remember you in all of our prayers, and we thank you for all the support for NFTU. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if nothing comes up from us for the rest of the week, we'll see you Sunday. Through the prayers of Holy Fathers, which is Christ our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. And so let me let Father Patrick go. Hold on. I'm going to actually let both of us go. What we're going to do here is I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to remove